Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. Clearly, we are facing extraordinary times in Lebanon currently, not that were not expected, unfortunately, and for some time we knew this escalation would be coming in place. But what is happening and has happened over the past few weeks has been astonishing in its significance in terms of destruction and the speed in which people have been displaced. We have upwards of 1.2 million people affected now by this crisis, hundreds of thousands of people displaced from the 7 districts in the frontline areas of the south of this country bordering Israel, and of course the southern suburbs of Beirut. Emptied, and many of these towns, villages, and suburbs now little more than rubble. We have, in this fast-moving emergency, now seen, horrific cases of forced evacuation notices coming out with few hours for people to prepare and depart. So many of the families that were displaced over the past year, who have prepared themselves, taken their family belongings, are far, far better off than the much greater majority today who have left, in some cases, with only hours to spare before their areas have become under bombardment. And so we're seeing families in shelters. There's now 973 formal shelters inside Beirut in the north of the country, with more than 200,000 people living there registered. 773 of those shelters are absolutely chock-a-block full. These are shelters that were typically schools or academies or government buildings, where there's insufficient, toilets and bathrooms and infrastructure to cope with the sheer numbers who are now living there 24/7, as opposed to the children or students or workers who would normally only be there for a number of hours of a day. Many of the families that I've met, and I was in the south of the country earlier last week, talk about the fact that they are moving not just because of fear of destruction of their land and their homes and their neighborhoods, but also because they've lost people. They've lost family and friends and communities, and they are extraordinarily fearful of what comes next. Trauma, in terms of mental as well as physical trauma, is key to this. People have watched over the last year as the war in Gaza has continued, and neighborhoods have been decimated and pounded over and over and over again. And that is deep in their gut, in their hearts, in their minds when they move on. What are we trying to do about all of this? Well, we have been from the very first days able to reach around 150,000 people each day with hot meals, with ready-to-eat rations, sort of a 5-day to 15-day rations, depending on people's ability to cook, fresh bread, sandwiches, and indeed, very importantly in Lebanon, in this environment, cash transfers. So 150,000 people helped daily at the moment, but that needs to increase. We are always playing catch up because we need to be reaching, at this point, almost 1 million people per day. Right now, we've distributed 500,000 hot meals being prepared through 10 kitchens, as well as those other forms of aid and assistance as well. But there's massive work to be done. 200,000 people in formal shelters. There's many, many hundreds of thousands of more living in informal sites, unfinished buildings, falling down buildings, and indeed, unfortunately, sleeping out rough. Currently, the weather's good. Last night it rained. Every night we hear explosions as missiles land in the southern suburbs. Agriculture-wise, food production-wise, extraordinary concern for Lebanon's ability to continue to feed itself. 1,900 hectares of agricultural land have been burned in the south of the country over the past year, primarily in the last few weeks. 12,000 hectares of farmland in what is one of the most productive areas of the country have been abandoned. 46,000 farmers impacted heavily by this crisis. Olive harvests in the south will not happen. Bananas, citrus harvests will not happen. Vegetables rot in fields, and a country that is already dependent on imports has a harder time because what they could provide for their own food security and food system needs is being decimated in the south. We have very significant needs moving forward. Over the next 3 months, as I said, we are building up to reach at least 1 million people who have been impacted, working within a system of organizations that provide food systems and food security support. We have a funding gap of $115 million over that time. We believe, starting to receive positive pledges against that, but at the moment we are working based upon the anticipatory action, the preparedness we put in place, thankfully funded by some of our key donors ahead of the escalation, where we were able to pre-position some food around the country and put some cash aside for emergency transfers. Key messages right now are clearly de-escalate. De-escalate, de-escalate. Diplomatic, political solutions must be found because the significance of the humanitarian need in a country that has already been racked by accumulated problems over the last few years, not least the economic crisis, but also the fragility that comes from hosting the equivalent of 25% of their population in refugees. And really a country which is already on its knees and that cannot cope with an extended period of crisis such as we're facing right now. The country is tired, people are scared, the trauma is palpable, and obviously we're all concerned that what started a year and a day ago with those horrific events in Gaza now will continue into what could be a more regional crisis. Let's prevent, and de-escalate. Thank you.